Hi, quick comment on developments in Iran. I think the equity market's done a pretty good job of sniffing out what's going down here. I'm surprised that the commentary is still as uncertain as it seems to be about what's going on. This is clearly in wind down mode. I call it kabuki wind down mode because over the next 24 to 72 hours, both sides need to be able to frame this as a victory. Trump will be telling us this was the best military operation since the storming of Normandy and that all his objectives were achieved. And Iran will have unfortunately killed 7 or 8 U.S. servicemen and can say they fended off the imperialists or however they want to frame it. But this thing's over. It's funny. This has really been an amazing example of what the late great Scott Adams used to call seeing two different movies on the same screen. We're very politically divided, and Scott Adams used to say that people could see the same events and have completely different interpretations of what they thought they were seeing. And I'm just amazed at how many people out there are watching the same thing I'm watching and coming to the conclusion that Iran is somehow winning this. They haven't hit anything. I mean, how could they possibly be winning? We haven't seen any dramatic blows dealt by the Iranians, and the volume of their both missiles and drones is falling precipitously. It seems pretty clear that the U.S. and Israel have complete control over the air and sea, and that this is basically a wipeout militarily to this point. Now, of course, the U.S. has saddled itself with one big constraint, and this is Iran's one piece of leverage, that Trump knows he can't do a ground war or his presidency is over. So that necessarily means that they have to restrict their objectives. If you're going to restrict yourself to air war, you can pretty much forget about regime change. So that's why the Iranians aren't really escalating. They're not, mining the strait. There are no terrorist cells being activated because they're just going to sit here and let the U.S. and Israel bomb themselves out for a few more days, and they get to survive. And I think this is what the strategy was with appointing a ghost as the next supreme leader. We don't even know if Mojtaba Khamenei is still alive. He hasn't said anything or made any kind of public appearance. But this was meant to, I think, signal that, hey, if you're going to threaten our regime, we'll go as far as we need to go. We can draw you into a ground war, and that's going to be ugly for both sides, which it would have. So this was always going to end up with some kind of BS deal that Trump spins as meeting all his objectives, and the Iranian regime gets to survive in some form. If they're lucky, they can suggest they're going to play nice and maybe get the sanctions eased a little bit, start making some money. There are reports that the military is pushing aside the theologians, and that new contingent might be more interested in making some cash and trying to rebuild the political support for the regime by getting the economy back on some kind of footing. So this thing's over. Equity market has it right. Oil probably has further to fall, and the U.S. Treasury market will continue to reprice in coming days. Of course, subject to whatever the CPI may bring tomorrow, but I still like the bond market here and still long equities in the next few days as I think this will be resolved.